welcome to the UltraRunning Magazine podcast. Boy, am I so excited to get your notebooks out. We welcome to the show Coach Cliff Pittman. He is now a contributor to our lovely magazine, and he has a great article in our new issue right now on newsstands now, or go check your mailbox or subscribe or resubscribe, like right now. Well, press pause, subscribe, come back. Okay. Coach Pittman, how you doing today?
I am doing great, Scotty. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for being here. I'm so excited. We're going to talk about just the springing forward into spring summer races through our winter training and just kind of giving folks what they need to know to get through these cold winter months. But before we get to that, you, my friend, had a bit of an adventure just a few days ago over there in Arkansas on the Ozark Highlands Trail, a section of it. Tell us all about it. You're going for an FKT. Let's hear it.
Yes, yeah, sure did. And like a lot of things in our sport, you draw up a good plan, it doesn't go the way you anticipate. So I did not get the FKT, but I did go out there and gather a lot of really good experience, learned a lot about myself, learned a lot about the route, some excellent course recon, and just generally had a really good time, regardless to the outcome. And for those of you that are watching on video here, you can see in my background, this is the Ozark Highlands Trail. Scotty, have you ever been out here before?
I have not had the pleasure. I'm excited to hear about this. What was the attempt? Give us the profile of the distance,
Yeah,
the elevation, the terrain. Just it sounds like it was a beast.
yeah, yeah. So the Ozark Highlands Trail, the OG Ozark Highlands Trail is 165 miles. It goes through the Ozark Mountains in North Arkansas. And this is an extension of that trail. It's a 31-mile section. Eventually, it's going to connect to the Ozark Trail that runs through Missouri. I think it'll be 300 plus miles by the time it's all connected. This 31-mile section, though, is about a little over 5,000 feet of gain. So nothing crazy in terms of elevation change, but it's highly technical, like all the trails in the Ozarks. Just a lot of rocks, a lot of baby heads, loose footing, off-camber stuff. So that was really kind of the crux of it was getting out there and seeing some of these sections that I haven't run before and not being, let me rephrase that. It's not that I wasn't prepared for it. It was that I didn't know how to properly pace it, knowing that some sections were going to be 2 minutes per mile slower than some of the other sections.
Mhm.
So a lot of creek crossings. In this part of the country, after leaf off, there's just a terrible amount of leaves covering the trails, which adds to the technicality. But overall, very, very beautiful trail. Not a lot of people have experienced it or are familiar with it. So if you're ever in this part of the country, I highly recommend going out and checking out the Ozark Highlands Trail.
What is the current FKT for that section?
For that section, it is owned by Jake Anderson, who is an amazing individual in our community. He's a race director of 3 Days of Silamo and several other races in the area. And he has it at 5 hours and 11 minutes. And he was out there supporting me and hoping that I would break it, but came up short. I think I was on pace through about 24, 26 miles, and then the wheels just came off and kind of just death marched it in for a 5:38.
Well, I do appreciate just the trail love that he gave you to help you, get that goal. It's such a unique and interesting facet to our community that I love so much. That brings us all coming
Yeah.
back. So what would you say was kind of the maybe some elements that kept you from reaching that goal for yourself?
It really came down to just not pacing it properly. And so the first 9 miles is arguably the most technical and challenging. Um, I was probably, for that 9 mile section, I was about 10 minutes behind where I thought I would be. And so instead of just being patient and trusting my fitness to make up that time throughout the next 21 miles, I essentially made it up in the next 10 miles.
Mhm.
So that 10-mile section, I just ran entirely too hard and burned too many matches. And although I was keeping up with my carbohydrate intake and fluid intake and was making sure that I checked all the boxes. I just ran a little bit beyond my capabilities for that section, and then it came back to bite me later.
Yeah, yeah, I think we've all been there before in one form or another, given a training run or a race, of just that
Hmm.
duration. So we can all empathize here. How long was this on your radar to attempt? And is this your first FKT attempt?
It is my first FKT attempt. I am going to go back. I'm going to go back in the fall and give it another shot now that I have a little bit better, course recon and how to approach it. Um, but this really hasn't, this section at least hasn't been on my radar very long at all. I was planning on doing one of Jake Anderson's races, and he's moving it to a different time of year. So he actually came up with things like, hey, you should just come out and do this, and I'll support you. So it's only been on my radar for a few months.
Yeah. Yeah.
But this overall, the entire Ozark Highlands Trail section, um, whenever everything's connected, that is a much bigger project that I'm looking at maybe 3 to 5 years from now.
Okay. Okay. Respect. That's great. For those who are not familiar with the 3 days at Asilamo, can you give us,
Mhm.
it is a unique event. Tell us
It
about that.
is. It is by far my favorite race that I've ever attended or participated in. All the things that we love about ultra running and race environments. It's that times three. So you get to, camp out and you get to meet a lot of different people and share a lot of miles with different people on different days. And it's just a lot of fun. Day one is a 50K. Day two is a 50 miler. And day three is a 20K. The 50K course every year or it's not alternating, it changes. It's a new course every single year.
Uh-huh.
The 50-mile course alternates between odds and even years, and then the 20K course is a loop, and it changes between clockwise and counterclockwise every year.
That
So
sounds fun.
you get a little bit of like what's coming, but at the same time, it's enough variables to you want to come back and do it again the next year. And kind of just keeping in the spirit, the way that it was founded 20 years ago was there's minimal course markings as well, so it's kind of got that adventure feel to it. So you do have to be pretty comfortable just navigating and staying on course.
What else should people know about that race?
I think the best way to approach it is to be very conservative on that 50K day one. Day two is where you kind of lay it all out there at the 50 miler. And then day three is just all about survival.
Survival indeed. Now, can you pick like I want to do one out of three races, or do you have to do all three?
Yeah, you do get to pick. And so this year, I think, I think this year I'm just going to do the 50 milers. It's hard. I actually was fortunate enough to win it last year, and I want to, as I watch Ultra sign up and some really good runners, that are going to be going at them, I get FOMO a little bit. Like I want to go out there and race, but uh, I'm kind of dialing back the races this year, and I think I'm just going to focus on that 50 miler on day two.
Ultra sign up needs to change that button from register now to FOMO release.
That's right.
Like just let it go. Okay, cool. I'm in.
That's exactly right. I love
Well,
it.
thanks for telling us about that. And
Yeah,
looking forward to talking to you again later this year when you go for it for a rematch. So
absolutely.
yeah, and kudos to Jake Anderson for just being such a great human being. I know he does a lot out there for
Yeah,
the trail running community on that
yes,
on in the Ozarks, and we're just so glad to have him among our brethren. So, but we're
absolutely.
here to talk about winter training. Oh my gosh, it is cold, cold, cold across the country, and we're all trudging through it together from the west to the east. So I wanted to cover some things with you. We there's your article which is excellent, talking about applying the principle of specificity. We also want to talk about consistency. So, jumping right into this, what is your approach to training when you're emphasizing simplicity?
Yeah, absolutely. So when it comes to, you said simplicity,
Yeah.
just the simple nature of training. Yeah. we tend to, as human beings, just overcomplicate everything, right? And for whatever reason, we all have different motivators to do that. I certainly do it myself. As a coach, I've learned that I think one of the key principles to be an effective coach is to be able to kind of zoom out on just about everything and look at things from a 30,000 foot view. Because as athletes, and consumers, we're constantly bombarded with different marketing, different influencers. This is what's working. This is what you need to do. This is the only way to go about this. And I think if we can just help people zoom out and look at things from a 30,000 foot view, that oftentimes simplicity is the most effective strategy. And so if we're showing up on a daily basis, we're being consistent, um, we're doing the basics, right? We're sleeping enough, we're eating enough, and we're training on a regular basis. Like if you're new to this sport, or if you're new to running, if you just do those things, you're going to get really fit over time, and you're going to be able to avoid injury. Now, there's a lot of nuances and complexities that come in when you've been doing this for quite some time. You've got bigger systems that require more stressors in order to get that like next 1%. But I think, if we can all just focus on that like 99% of things that we know work really well and just focus on mastering that before we get into these different training interventions and supplements and nutrition strategies, we're all going to be better for it. And that applies to winter training, spring training, year-round training.
I immediately had two questions pop up in my mind when you were speaking, which is getting the simplicity of getting enough sleep and eating enough. And I'm asking myself, am I sleeping enough? Am I eating enough? So for you, ideally, what is a proper amount of sleep? We all are, redlining, I feel like, so often with our busy lives, with our families and our work and extracurriculars, and including this crazy ass sport. We're all trying to reach our goals here. So ideally, what range of sleep should we be getting every night?
Yeah, I think, and I don't have a study off the top of my head, but I believe the consensus is somewhere between 7 to 9 hours per night.
Mhm.
I think that there's a lot of individuality here, though, like with anything else. And, some people require less, some people require more. But I believe if you're getting within that range of 7 to 9 hours a night, you're doing a good job.
Yeah.
And, with training volume coming up, with stress being high, work-related stress, things outside of training, I think we need to be further and further on the high end of that range to account for those factors.
Yeah. I did an interview with Mandy Holmes, who's also a UltraRunning magazine ambassador. She's a great runner, and she said something to me that's really changed how I look at sleep. Is she said that she has to protect sleep, and I've used that as a mantra to just say I have to be in bed by a certain time, especially for those early morning wake up calls. Those 4 a.m. wake up calls. Had one on Saturday. During the week, I'm up at 5 a.m., even earlier sometimes, through the week. And so protecting sleep is giving myself permission to and command to force myself to put the damn phone down. No, you don't need to binge watch every single night, which, has completely upended our regular cycles, not including everything else as life gets in the way. So moving on to fuel and am I eating enough? I think that's such a culprit. And, am I eating enough? Am I eating too little or eating too much? And trying to find that sweet spot, for nutrition. So what are some maybe principles that you like to adhere to for your
Yeah.
athletes?
Yeah, great question. First, I encourage all of my athletes to work with an expert in the space. I feel very um, comfortable and have certifications in sports nutrition and help my athletes dial up sports nutrition strategies. But when it comes to day-to-day eating and as a lifestyle and fueling, I really encourage my athletes to work with experts in the space to learn more about nutrition science. And it can be very complex and also very individual. And that's one, common theme when working with athletes is that no two athletes are alike in just about any regard.
Mhm.
And nutrition can certainly highlight that. Um, but I think, developing a level of intuition and understanding your body is probably a core principle of knowing, like, okay, am I satisfied? Am I satisfied? Am I full? Do I feel like I'm recovering? Do I feel like I'm performing well in my workouts, in my races? Having that level of intuition is a critical skill for athletes to develop. And a lot of times that's just a lot of trial and error. Like I don't think you have to um, overanalyze every macronutrient and micronutrient. And maybe there's a season where you want to record everything and log everything to just get a snapshot and an idea of what you're doing. But I don't think that's the goal. I don't think that's the end goal. I think the end goal is to have that intuition to understand how your body is responding based on the fuel that you're putting in and the output through exercise and all the other factors and everyday life that requires fuel as well.
Mhm. I'd like to take a second here just to plug that in my next episode, we're going to be talking with Kelly Newland, who is a dietitian and part of Real Athlete Diets out of Boulder, Colorado. So super excited to
Yes,
get into that conversation with her to learn more about that. But
she's
as
amazing.
Oh, you're familiar. So yeah, she's
Yep.
great. I cannot wait for that. I'm going to geek out on culinary stuff. Just hold on, folks. But as a coach, are there markers that you see or pay attention to when you notice that your athletes maybe aren't feeling right? As they start their morning kind of training run routine.
Mhm. Yeah, so as a coach, we should be looking at data. But I think that's only 50% of the equation. The other half is subjective feedback.
Mhm.
And as coaches, we need to be very in tune with how our athletes are feeling, post-workout, pre-workout, during workout. And I encourage all of my athletes to leave me notes, whether it be in like the Training Peaks platform that we use to manage training, um, text or email, however we're communicating. I really want to know how they're feeling. And if that feedback is, lacking energy when they shouldn't be lacking energy, if we experience times of nagging injuries, that's a huge red flag to be like, okay, let's start uncovering this. Let's talk about sleep. Let's talk about nutrition. Let's get an idea of what's actually taking place here. So I heavily rely on a collaborative process with my athletes in that relationship to get that feedback from them, transparent, authentic feedback of how they're actually feeling. Because sometimes we can get ahead of it. If they're providing good feedback, we can get ahead of that if they're feeling low on energy when the training doesn't necessarily reflect that they should be that fatigued. We can start having meaningful conversations around these things and uncover some issues. And then it's a matter of, okay, we have an easy course correction here of just consuming more calories, or it's more nuanced and complex, and we need to bring in an expert in this space.
Mhm, mhm. That's a great answer. I am so guilty of not utilizing my training peaks to comment and get feedback to my own coach after my daily workout. And I really need to be more cognizant of that starting tomorrow. Just to get that feedback. If I felt great, I'll let them know. If I'm not, I need to be a little more nuanced in that feedback. I even considered letting them know, I don't know if I'm feeling correctly. I felt sluggish because, I am struggling with that, with the getting enough energy in for those morning runs, especially as I'm building those workouts and intensifying. So that's just good information to have. So moving on to the training during wintertime, trying to get back to that. Um, what are some of the bigger challenges that ultra runners face during these cold winter months?
Yeah, so just, for the West Coast athletes, it's just access to trails, right? is not being able to go out and train in an environment that's specific to the goals that they have. And sometimes that's a very, weighs heavily psychologically if you're having to log a lot of hours on a treadmill or do a different sport that maybe isn't your primary passion. Um, but a lot of times it's just a matter of figuring out what you do enjoy and then also realizing that you might have to make some sacrifices for a short period of time for the greater good, to keep your goals within reach, whether that be running on a treadmill or spending more time on the roads that are more accessible.
Mhm.
It's kind of funny, Scotty, like here where I'm at, this is prime trail running season in the winter. That's when our trails are most accessible and the most explored. Because in the summer months, everything's overgrown and, you know, ticks and rattlesnakes and overgrowth out on the more remote, trails.
Yeah.
So it's a little bit of the inverse where I'm at compared to most of our community out west.
Wow, that's something I never really had considered for large regions of our country is the overgrowth
Yeah.
with the vegetation. That's I guess I'm so lucky to have well maintained trails out here,
Yeah.
and quite enough poison oak uh, to last me a lifetime. So, when but what about for regions where we're where maybe we can't run as much, where it's just there's so much snow.
Mhm.
Do you have any recommendations for cross training and being able to still enjoy the outdoors? What are some activities that you find to be really beneficial for the endurance athlete?
Yeah, so I mean, obviously, a lot of endurance athletes are on skis this time of year. If they have the access to ski, and I think that's a great sport. Cross training is highly effective. A lot of them provides a lot less impact, a lot less. I don't want to say damaging on the body, but a lot less stress in terms of impact. And you can still train effectively and intentionally, with different modalities, whether it's on the skis or on a bike, you can still incorporate high intensity, structured or maybe even unstructured in sort of a fartlek fashion, of getting in a variety of different intensities. So I think really it comes back to, what do you have accessible and what do you enjoy? And starting with those two things and then figuring out, okay, well, how can we structure this so that it is aligned with the goals that you have for yourself later on in the year? And typically, if you, for example, if you're in Western states, then you want to be doing a lot of higher intensity work, lower volume, this far out. And then over time, which I'm sure we're going to get to, we're going to progress to more specific training that would relate to the unique demands of Western states,
Um,
which requires a lot of running.
it just require a lot of running. Uh, so, how about building base during this time period? What does a typical week look like for building that?
Yeah, so base is kind of an interesting term in our sport. Like I don't even really know how to define it as an ultra runner because base training in its traditional sense is higher volume, lower intensity. And essentially, as ultra runners, that's what we're doing in our race specific phase. So that base period becomes specificity whenever we're training for, ultra distances. Um, but in the context of the traditional sense of base training, what that can look like is just anywhere between, and I still like to polarize training. So hard days hard, easy days easy. And hard really can be anything that is taxing to the system that's going to be a stress that requires, rest, recovery, active recovery. So when I say polarize, what that might look like is a 90-minute activity on one day and then a 45 to 60-minute zone one active recovery on the next day. And so we have a harder day and an easier day. Depending on the athlete, that ratio might look, or that density might look a little bit differently. And a higher volume athlete might do 3 or 4 90-minute activities in a row, followed by a 45 to 60-minute zone one recovery activity, and then going back, to endurance type work. Where a newer athlete, we might want to do a 45, 60-minute for 2 days, and then give them a little bit more of a stimulus with a 90-minute effort, and then dial that back down to a 45, 60-minute, and then maybe even a rest day. So it kind of depends on the athlete's level, the training history, the systems that they have, and how much stress we need in order to build on those systems and increase those capacities. But essentially, it's a lot of zone one and a lot of zone two work in that time frame for a base period. And maybe we can work in some different things such as strides, to increase leg turnover and prepare the connective tissues and musculature for upcoming higher intensity efforts that we'll have later on, whether those be VO2 max intervals or threshold work. That's quite a bit more demanding.
What works for you when it comes to that zone one of active recovery?
What works for me?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think it's twofold. One is it's not enough stress to really put the athlete at a deficit, but at the same time, it's still building overall volume. So when we look at zone one active recovery, it's not the same thing as rest. So we need to acknowledge that. Like you have rest, and then you have active recovery, which contributes to recovery, but it's not the same thing as rest. And so we're actually still accumulating some stress, and we're still building aerobic fitness when we do that. And when you look at it at the end of the week or the end of a block, or let's zoom out and look at a whole, annual training plan or a macro cycle, those zone one days, active recovery days, make a pretty significant portion of overall volume. But what I find is, especially when I work with new athletes, that I'll kind of just paint a picture here. An athlete that's been training for a long time, and they're competing at a high level. One of the first things that we do is we just implement these zone one active recovery days into their training, because we find that they're just running too hard all the time. A lot of just zone two work. And you can get by with it because zone two is not stressful. You can still log a lot of volume that way. But whenever you incorporate these zone one active recovery days, you can really polarize the training, and you can get more out of those athletes on harder days. And so it's really contributing to the overall bigger picture of getting in bigger, harder efforts to challenge their already robust systems in a way that they haven't done before. They're having more availability or energy availability to do those things because they're recovering better with those active recovery days.
Um,
And it's hard, especially hard for gifted, fast athletes to slow down.
yeah, it's well, welcome. Let's bring into the interview studio our friend Ego.
That's right.
Our
That's
friend
right.
Ego loves to push it.
Yeah. Yeah. Especially with I mean, you've got Strava and the whole world looking at your training, right? And so it's like, oh, why, if you're this type of athlete, why are you running 9-minute miles whenever, you could do that same run at 5-minute miles? It's
Right.
because there's a purpose here, and
Right.
there's no ego involved.
Oh my gosh. How many times have I been out there just thinking, what are people going to think of me on Strava? And I'm not even paying that close attention to my own Strava, Like, I've learned to ignore it. I've learned to
it's
ignore it.
it's a struggle.
It's a struggle. So another struggle that I think we all deal with, especially during these long winter months, especially when we've got a very lofty goal ahead of us in the summertime, it's trying to stay motivated and sharp, mentally sharp, during this time. how do you approach that?
Yeah, so I think, with that, it comes back to making sure that we have a certain amount of clarity and understanding of our own motivators and our goals, and having those goals in front of us on a regular basis. And I'm very fortunate on our team at CTS. We have a mental performance specialist, Neil Palace. We'll give him a shout out real quick. And he's always contributing to, we have weekly continuing education sessions, and he's always contributing to the whole by delivering a lot of really good information on the sports psych side of things.
Mhm.
And he's a huge asset to the team. But, I think if we can be values driven athletes, and what I mean by that is just understanding what's important to us and what drives us internally. And so for me, like some of those values are um, resilience. I think that's a really good value to have as an ultra runner, because when things get deep in the pain cave, like that's something that I summon. Like I bring that in, like I need to have that in front of me. Like, okay, I really value just being a resilient person. And so if I want to act according with what's important to me, that's something I have to remind myself, because deep in an ultra, what's driving our decisions a lot of times? It's emotions, it's being uncomfortable, it's all of these things that don't align with who we are as people sometimes. So we have to get back to who are we? What do we of value? And then finding a way to build some type of system around us so that those values are always in front of us. So very simple exercise is just go, do a Google search for a values list, and you can probably find a list of 200 different values out there. Narrow it down to 10 that really mean something to you, that speak to you, that you like, what, that's something that I've identified throughout my life. That's important to me. And then spend a few weeks or a month or more contemplating on those values to narrow it down to like 3 to 5.
Mhm.
And those, core values are dynamic. They'll probably shift over time. But the more clarity that we can have on the values that we have, the more we can intentionally tell ourselves what to do, instead of letting our thoughts and our emotions run rampant like a child with a knife running around the house. Because that's often how our minds work as people and as ultra runners.
Yeah, it's really hard to sit with it, um, with that negativity, especially on the trail and things, or wheels are coming off, and it's just not going your way. How did you? I imagine you probably had to dig into that a little bit during your recent FKT when you realized, what, I'm not gonna hit this. How did that summon for you?
Yeah, so usually in a 50K, it's not quite long enough for me to have to dip into my values. But you're right, I did for this one, because the wheels fell off and I'm like, okay. Now I got to decide if I just want to pull the plug because the mission has failed,
Yeah.
or go ahead and finish this thing out. So yeah, I did have to return to that, and resilience was the one that I returned to in that moment, because I wanted to set the tone and precedence and example that even when things don't work out, as long as we can safely, you know, get ourselves to the finish, just go ahead and come out here and do what we set out to do, even if the outcome isn't perfect.
Yeah, stick with it. Stick with it.
You know,
I love
yeah.
that. Love that. I love that. I'm going to Google my own values list when this interview is over. I'm looking forward to that. You're that.
I don't want to oversell it, but man, it can change your life.
I'm all about it. I'm all about it. I'll try anything. Just ask my honey, who's rolling her eyes right now.
Oh
Talking
man.
about consistency, um, consistency over intensity. Um, how do you balance consistency with the need for recovery, when your body probably might need a little more rest during these winter months?
Yeah, so it comes back to just good training architecture, and making sure that throughout the year we have peaks and valleys. We have periods or seasons of hard training. We have periods or seasons of of easy training and rest and recovery. And so, when I first start working with an athlete, we look at a minimum 12 months. And we say, like, how's this year going to transpire based on the goals that you have? And then we start breaking it down into smaller blocks. And so the rest and recovery period is absolutely crucial to plan in advance and make sure that it is accounted for, because other seasons and other periods of the year, we really might go to the well. We're really going to push, and we're really going to intentionally overextend for a short period of time, and then make sure that we can bounce back and recover from that. That's the stress rest principle, or overload and recovery principle. Overloading a system, having ample time to recover from it. When we recover, that system is therefore bigger and stronger than it was before we applied the stress and the rest. And so it's just being very intentional and in an organized fashion. That's essentially periodization in a nutshell. We're organizing and planning out our year in a thoughtful way, accounting for all the variables and ensuring that we have seasons of hard training and seasons of easier and time of rest. And sometimes those transitions, or commonly referred to as off season, might mean we're not running at all. It might mean we're on the bike, or we're focusing on different goals, such as maybe nutrition. We're spending more time in the weight room, getting caught up on the honey-do list that we've been neglecting for a long time, and our spouse is grateful that we're dialing things back. There's a lot of things we can focus on outside of running. So yeah, just getting really organized.
I have no idea what you're talking about. None at all. But it's so true. It's so true. We don't grant ourselves that permission to even consider not running. We think that, I don't know, we all think we're all different people, but it just never really enters the sphere of my thinking that maybe, like, I could benefit from doing something else. Still keep my fitness, but it's good to take breaks from things. It's we tend to be obsessive about what we do and how we do it.
Yeah.
Especially
and they kind of
yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you,
Oh, go
Scotty.
ahead.
But
Yeah.
to kind of bring a full circle back to what we were talking about earlier with zone one and active recovery, it's just being intentional to say, like, I am dialing it back, or maybe I'm resting completely. I have to do this because I don't like resting. I'm taking a complete rest day today for my own benefit. Like, I am not training so that tomorrow and for this next week or this next month, I can show up as a better version of myself, recovered enough to handle the stress and the workload.
Yeah.
And so it's a matter of, like, like with most things in life, training is oftentimes 3 or 4 steps forward, 1 step back.
Yeah.
3 or 4 steps forward, 1 or 2 steps back. Sometimes we got to take 5 steps back for a short period to make sure that we can take those progressive steps forward over the long haul.
Yeah. This is where trust is so crucial with a training plan. Trust that what your coach is doing is saying for what to do is right. And it's taking those rest days. It just doesn't feel good. I just feel lazy. But I've noticed when I've recovered well and intentionally, that my performance improves. And that is really important to consider when you're feeling kind of like a sloth.
Yeah. And I just had this conversation with an athlete this morning, actually, where we are coming out of a really big race specific build, and they've put in a lot of volume and they're tired. But that the nature of that 4-week block is week 1 and week 2 are the toughest of those, because that's when the athlete was most fresh. And then we accounted for that accumulated fatigue in weeks 3 and weeks 4. We dialed back the intensity those weeks, kept the volume relatively the same. But the comment was from the athlete that, I'm just really feeling tired right now, and it's hard to maintain the self-efficacy or the confidence that I have the fitness to hit these goals because I'm so tired at the moment. And it's just a matter of reminding ourselves that, like, well, yeah, sometimes if we're, training in this way, our fatigue will outstrip our fitness.
Mhm.
And what I mean by that is that the fatigue is a louder voice in our ear because we're tired, we've got that accumulated fatigue building up, and our fitness isn't showing up as much because of that fatigue. And so at that point, whether we drew it up that way, or maybe we're having to shift gears because the fatigue is more than we anticipated, when we shift back into a recovery or a deload phase and we take 4, 5, maybe 6 days of active recovery or rest, the body is going to adapt and build up stronger systems. And then that fitness is a lot louder than the fatigue because the fatigue has taken a back seat at that point. And so it's a constant reminder of this, like, peaks and valleys, hard and easy, and reminding ourselves that there's a progression, there's a plan, and like you said, trusting the process, trusting the coach. If you go through that periodization enough times as an athlete and you see it work for yourself, it gets really easy to trust
Yeah.
the process. But if you're brand new to a different training methodology or brand new to a significant, overload and recovery in play, it can be really challenging at first to wrap your mind around it.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, you're dropping pearls. This is so good. Something that can interfere with that sometimes, I think, is the kind of the social element of running that, well, my buddies aren't running the same plan as I am, but I want to do what they're doing. And maybe they're going a little harder than I'm supposed to. I think giving yourself the allowance and permission to say, I would love to, I can maybe do this section with you or whatever, but knowing
Yeah.
you don't have to join the wagon, you know?
Yep.
Um, so,
Yep. And that
uh,
social aspect is so important too. Like, I encourage the athletes that I work with to incorporate that. If that's something that's meaningful to them, like, especially like coming back to the values, right? If they value community, they value the social aspect of running, then it absolutely has to be a part of training.
yeah,
And what that might mean is that we make a sacrifice over here on the perfect workout. All right, we're going to throw that perfect workout out because in the bigger picture here, it's not as important as you being congruent with your values and getting the social run in. So now your quality day is keeping up with this faster group, even though it's not structured, in a meaningful way that might get the exact adaptations we're going for. It's still beneficial. And most importantly, it's fulfilling that value that you have.
mm. This dovetails perfectly into this next part, which is adapting plans. So, how do you help athletes adapt their training when life kind of gets in the way? With, I got sick, my family's sick, I got work stuff. Like, what role does that play?
Oh, huge, huge. I think that's probably like maybe the one of the biggest benefits of working with the coach is, being able to have somebody in your corner that's looking at your training objectively and that can work with all the messiness that we have in life. We all have messes. All those messes look a little bit differently. I've got 4 messes at home. I got 4 kids, and it's just a joke around here. Like, anyone that knows me, if it's race week, I'm battling some type of virus. It's inevitable. So I just prepare for it. But yeah, adapting is huge. And if if we're gonna miss like maybe 1 or 2 workouts, it's usually a matter of, like, what, we're just gonna move on and we're gonna jump back into the training plan. But if significant illness comes up, or um, family obligations, or work obligations, and then we have to throw the whole plan out, we throw the whole plan, we throw the whole micro plan out. That's 7 days, and we just go back to the drawing board and say, okay, what obstacles do we have, and what's the most efficient way or the most beneficial way that we can go forward with the challenges that we're facing, right? And so a lot of times it's a matter of this mental exercise of what can I control, what can I not control. All right, here's the things that I've identified that I can control, so I'm going to do my best and focus my efforts on these controllable factors. I can train, these 4 or 5 days a week. Here's the time limitation that I have, and we're going to do the best we can with that. training plans are very rarely ever perfect. But if an athlete can be 80% compliant for the plan that we drew up, factoring in all the messes in life, if they're 80% compliant, then on race day, they're going to be really fit. They're going to have all their strategies dialed in, and they're going to be confident. And that's kind of what, as a coach, it's like that's what my I joke like I'm a confident slinger. That's what I'm dealing. Like it's like I want to create athletes that are very confident in themselves, and I do that with building fitness, helping them fine tune strategies, race day strategies, and just making sure that those things contribute to the belief that they have in themselves that they can go out and tackle this huge goal,
Yeah.
that they're equipped to do so.
What
I think 80% compliance does that.
what are some common roadblocks to an athlete gaining confidence in your experience?
Um, I think just having a healthy relationship with the training process. And a lot of times athletes will look at workouts as pass or fail. And so if I prescribe a certain workout and we'll just throw out like, okay, you've got a 3 by 10 minutes at lactate threshold. This is the purpose of the workout and what I want you to do. And here's some like targets for you to hit, whether that be, usually everything I prescribe is RPE based, but just for the sake of this example, we'll say, okay, I want you to hit these pace targets to know that you're operating in the proper intensity. The athlete comes back and didn't hit those targets for whatever reason. And therefore, now the biggest tool that I have in my tool belt to build confidence is now turned upside down. And we have to talk through like, okay, it's okay to fail in workouts. It's okay to not hit all your objectives. There's always context to this, like previous example that I used of an athlete at the end of a hard training block. Well, if you miss a workout, sometimes I might celebrate that. I might say, good, you're right where you need to be. Your training, your fatigue is so high that we found, the point where we need to shift into recovery. Good job. um, and so it's just having a healthy relationship with perceived failure. Like I just had to go through this myself just Friday, right? I did not hit my objective for that FKT. And so I had to reframe it. I had to look at it as, you know what? That was still a really big day. I put in 5.5 hours of work over very challenging terrain. I learned a lot about the course. Here's some positive takeaways. I nailed my nutrition. I nailed my hydration. Um, and just reframing that missed target or that missed objective into the silver lining or all the positives that we can take away from it, and realizing that, okay, when I go back and do this again in the fall, I'm better equipped. I know better what to expect. I'm going to have a better pacing strategy, and theoretically, no setbacks. I should have better fitness. So this is a good example of like reframing it.
Yeah.
So I think that we just have to have a good relationship with this past failure concept, and also a good relationship with the training process to know that it's okay to not always be at your best,
Yeah.
that the work that you're doing still counts, even if it's not perfect. So throw your perfectionism out the window because it's just hurting yourself and it's just setting yourself back and it's just getting in the way of you hitting your goals.
Well, you are absolutely slinging confidence over here. Uh, so many of us, human nature being what it is, the human condition, especially when it comes to not hitting a big goal. Let's say, get in Western states and DNF, because you go into the pain cave. And I mean, this could be a big event. It could be just a training run where you go into the pain cave because something went wrong. And then all of a sudden you're backing up a U-Haul and unloading all of your stuff of doubt and like, I'm a failure and I can't do this. I'm no good. And just like mired in it, and just staying there. We've got to pick ourselves back up. Yeah, just great advice. Really great advice here.
We gotta get back to our values, right?
That's right.
And sometimes we can fail, we can DNF, but we can still be congruent with our values.
Yeah.
And if we still, went out there and we gave it our very best, and we prepared for it, and we did our best on the execution, and we were congruent with our values out there in the course. You can't call that a failure. You can't say, you can't wrap your identity in that DNF
Yeah.
because you did everything right. It's just that you didn't have what it required on that specific day to get it done.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And that happens to all of us. It happens to the best of us. It happens to the very front of the field. The greatest ultra runners in the world have had their days when everything didn't come together.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, I wanted to ask you about some kind of, I just questions about your coaching overall. If that's okay. Um,
Mm-hmm.
just uh, why did you get into coaching?
Mm. Yeah, good question. Um, Probably a little bit of being in the right place at the right time, a little bit of beautiful accidents, and just following what I'm passionate about. And so I have kind of a hodgepodge, interesting background of things that have nothing to do with coaching or exercise physiology. Studied business, spent 10 years in the military. It's my time in the Army that I really found a passion for fitness. Well, no, I take that back. I ran competitively as a track athlete at a very early age, competing on a national stage when I was much, much younger. And so that was really where I developed a passion for running that extended on into my time in the military, where I really gained a lot of interest in just leadership as a whole. And after 10 years in the military, I spent some time in corporate America, did not like it whatsoever, and coaching was my ticket out. But it wasn't endurance coaching. I was an executive coach. I started coaching executives in our organization on identifying their values, being congruent with their values, time management principles, and just essentially showing up as the best version of themselves as human beings so that they can be more effective and efficient in their careers. And that was it was fun, but it wasn't necessarily what I was passionate about. And I actually, I haven't been ultra running that long. 2019 was like when I got into the sport, and there was just a lot of synergies with what I was doing as an executive coach, and decided to start coaching athletes. And so I was like, hey, well, I have to go acquire some certifications, and then it turned into, oh, I need to go find a mentor. And so I sought out Jason Koop, and I was like, hey, I'm going to hire you. I want you to coach me, but here's the caveat: I want you to also mentor me as a coach. And he took me on and started mentoring me. And then he invited me to join the CTS team as an independent contractor coach. And then turns out this role as coaching development director opened up, which matched up my previous experiences in business and leadership and human resources that I accumulated between military and corporate America,
Mhm.
all with my passion for trail and ultra running. So yeah, here I am, and overall, my philosophy is human first. I really want to understand athletes as humans and as individuals, and understand what motivates them, what drives them, what are the circumstances and things that they're working with, family dynamics, career dynamics, and all those things, because everything affects training. Everything affects performance to some degree. And then essentially just helping them become a more confident version of themselves, and leveraging fitness as the biggest tool.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, Good for you, and congratulations for being able to parlay this into something that you're truly passionate about and in helping others.
Thank you.
It's one, and you have this attribute, and this attribute is so it's so interesting to me when working with a running coach, which is connection, the connection that a runner can have with their coach, and just how important that is. So, can you maybe talk about that a little bit, about that connection with your athletes and the meaningfulness of it, and why it's so important to incorporate into your investment into someone?
Yeah, I think it's everything. I think it's the only way to have sustainable results over time. Because as a coach, I can know all of the science and practically how to use it. But if I'm not connected with that athlete on an individual level, then it's just not going to be a sustainable relationship over time. There's going to be other coaches, there's going to be other products. AI is coming into the mix. I have a strong belief that a big portion of the coaching industry is going to be replaced by AI.
Wow.
And if they're not, and the difference is, it's like if they're not connecting with the athletes on a human level, that human interaction, those are the coaches at risk of being replaced by AI, because AI will eventually figure it out and be able to deliver a product and service that is going to help athletes become really fit. But it's not going to compete with like what we offer at CTS as a individual coaching. It's not going to compete with what a lot of great coaches are doing out there in the ultra running space. There's so many good coaches out there that are connecting with human beings. And so, yeah, I think kind of just coming back to, understanding the human being, that's a critical component of coaching, because at the end of the day, we're not coaching machines and we're not coaching robots. We're coaching people.
Yeah.
And so we have to be able to connect with them. And then I think there's also a psychological performance benefit to it as well. For example, when I'm out there competing and, it comes across my mind that I want to make my coach proud. I want to make I want to make Coop proud, and I've had athletes tell me the same thing for my service. Like, hey, I didn't finish simply because I knew you were invested in me and I didn't want to let you down.
Yeah.
And like, I feel like that's a really good place to be as a coach and athlete. If you can have that type of relationship, that there's so much, I don't know how else to put it other than heartstrings, right? There's heartstrings there, so that you really want to perform at your best in order to make that relationship work and that person proud.
Yeah. I work with the running coach and for a few years now, and I would not give up the relationship with my running coach for the best AI in the world.
Yep.
He regularly tells me that he loves me and vice versa. I'm not going to get that from an app or an impersonal sort of, coaching plan.
Yep.
I don't go there because I have like emotional needs to have those met. But I know that this person's looking out after me, and everyone else that is out there on the trail with me.
Yep.
And you just can't get that anywhere else. So I just would encourage anyone to, if you've thought about working with a coach, you could benefit from it. Absolutely do it.
Yep.
If you can do it. It's changed. It's changed so much in my world. I'm so thankful for it. So I
I
imagine.
love hearing that experience. That's really good to hear. There's a lot of good coaches out there in this sport,
Right.
and I'm glad to hear for the industry that's awesome.
Yeah, man, connections, everything, absolutely everything. Everything else is in second place.
Yep.
So, um, let's see. I think I'll set the. I think I'll leave the coaching aspects of alone now. I think that's a great way to end there. So just kind of moving on to some more lighthearted sort of questions for you. So during the winter months, what is your go-to trail system? Um,
Yeah. So here so I live in Fayetteville, Arkansas. Northwest Arkansas is what is referred to as the metropolitan. And we have an endless amount of urban trails that connect. When I say urban trails, I'm not talking like bike paths, talking about actual single track, hand cut single track that connect. So I've got 3 trail systems within a mile of my front door that I can run to. One of them is Kessler Mountain Regional Park. That's probably my favorite. And then there's Devil's Den State Park, which is about a 20-minute drive, and it's just got some wicked gnarly technical stuff out there. So I'd love to go out there and play. But it's also got like a world-class mountain biking. So I don't know if you've heard of Bentonville, Arkansas. It's here in Northwest Arkansas. It's kind of self-proclaimed mountain biking capital of the world, but they do have some pretty like sweet epic trails throughout the whole area. So mountain biking is really big in our area, and as runners, we've benefited from that for sure. So yeah, there's some sweet mountain bike trails out there with you run through waterfalls and cool rock formations and all of that. We don't have the mountains like you guys have out in the Sierras, but we do have some pretty cool valleys and canyons and rock features and waterfalls.
That sounds fun to me. You're pinging my stoke meter right now, coach. Um,
It's a hidden gem, man. It's a hidden gem.
what's your like go-to mantra or motivation tip to get a runner out the door, especially during these cold winter mornings?
Ooh, that's a tough one. I would say that I'm really fortunate that the athletes I work with are all pretty self-motivated. Um, I don't know if that's maybe just because of the type of athletes that I attract and like to work with, or or if it's just, I'm in a place right now in my coaching career that can be pretty selective with who I work with. But I'm trying to think back on, times and where I did have to provide a little bit more motivation for athletes to get out the door and train. Um, I don't necessarily have a good answer for this. I think a lot of times this is just a matter of being able to zoom out and look at the bigger picture again
Mhm.
and come back to the values. So those are two things we've already talked about, but just reinforcing that again of like, okay, if I don't get this workout in today or don't get this easy run in today, whatever it is, like what does that mean for the whole picture? May not be a big deal at all, but am I setting a precedent of bad habits by not doing what I intend to do?
Yeah.
And most importantly, if I skip out today, am I being congruent with what I value? And that's for me personally, that's my deciding factor. Like I just went through this morning, where recovering from that FKT attempt and just didn't want to get out the door and run in the cold. And it came down to, well, mastery is one of my values. Like whatever I do, I want to do like my damn best at it and give it everything I have. Like I want to master that skill. And so not running just because I didn't feel like it didn't align with that value. So I let the value make the decision rather than my emotion in the moment.
Love it. Love it. Hope you all are taking notes. How do you like to treat yourself after a damn hard run?
Oh man. Usually it's pizza, but I treat myself with pizza all the time, whether I run hard or not. So I don't know if that's a proper answer. But
Hey,
that's usually a pizza and a Coca-Cola. That's my go-to. I like to, afford myself some time to rest. I'll lay on the couch and I'll put the compression boots on and just kind of check out for a little bit.
yeah,
My
yeah.
mind's usually going, 100 miles an hour most of the time. So I like to just give myself some space to check out and not be productive.
If I can sneak in like a 20-minute power nap after a long run in the middle afternoon, oh,
Oh,
oof, it feels good.
yeah. I don't know what that's like.
Yeah, you
I
don't.
haven't I haven't taken a nap in over 15 years.
You're not going to either for another 15.
That's how old my oldest is. So
Um, what piece of advice would you give, just one piece that you'd give someone who's new and attempting their first ultra marathon?
um start with why.
Mhm.
Understand why you're doing it. I think that if you can get a level of understanding around yourself and clarity of who you are and why you're doing something, that's solid, strong psychological foundation that you can build on physiologically.
That's great. Really great.
Write
Um,
out a mission statement.
mission statement. I don't have one. I should get one. I really should. Although I think I know what it is. It's about connection and staying consistent with running and just being
Mhm.
outdoors. I like to play outdoors and just
I love it.
that's just it's all about that. It really is.
And
Um,
that's how simple it is. Like you just came up with a mission statement on the fly like that. Like you knew what it was, even though you haven't actually gone through like a thought exercise on how to build one out. So
yeah.
like for everyone who's listening right now, that was a great example of just
Oh,
gaining some
thanks, coach.
clarity on what your purpose is.
Thank you. Just two more questions for you.
Yeah.
So looking ahead to 2025, is there anything that you're really excited about this year?
Um, yeah. So as a team at CTS, we've been around for 25 years and we have a very robust internal continuing education program. And right now, we're really building on that. And um, I like the direction that we're taking that continuing education program of just really concentrated themes each month and bringing in outside experts, academics, practitioners, and even having internal debates and roundtable discussions around these topics. So I'm really excited about just the development and the learning for myself and for all the coaches on our team. But very specifically, we just wrapped up an entire month on strength training for endurance athletes. And it was really beneficial. I'm about to finish up my NASM certified personal trainer uh, certificate. And so that'll be another tool in the tool belt, but also just helping athletes in general move a little bit better as people, um, and being a little bit more sound in the strength training programming for ultra runners because I think that it's actually very complex when you think about it, on how to do it because they're competing interests with building endurance and building strength, and it requires a very thoughtful and scientific approach in order to let that strength training come up as a supporting role to enhance endurance goals without being detrimental because it can absolutely become detrimental if you're in the gym too frequently, lifting too much, too high intensity. There's a lot of different things we can do in the gym to actually take away from our running.
Mm. Oh man, oof, you just hit me between the eyes just now. Something for me to consider. I think that what you just talked about with CTS, is that right?
Yes.
You talked about is where can people follow you online? How can they
Mhm.
contact you? What do they need to know to connect?
Yeah, so I'm trying to be more intentional and mindful about showing up on Instagram. I think it's a good platform to reach people and connect to people. So I'm going to be intentional about putting out more content there. So my handle is at Coach Cliff Pittman. Also now writing for UltraRunning magazine, which I'm like so stoked about. I absolutely love working with you guys.
Okay.
Um, Easy to work with, and you're putting out like high quality premium content. So like I can't tell you how excited and also humbled I am just to be a part of the team. Um, so yeah, you can find my writing there. Those are probably the best two places. If you're going to be out at Western States this year or Cocodona 250, I'll be out there pacing AJW. Then I'll also be out at Leadville. So yeah, if you guys are at any of those races, please come find me at the CTS tent and introduce yourself, and I'd love to connect with you.
Love it, Coach. Thank you so much for giving us your very valuable time,
Thank you.
energy, and thoughts here. I know that there's certainly a lot of takeaways from me that I cannot wait to incorporate into my regiment. And I really do hope that if Coach is speaking to you, that you reach out to him. Yeah, and I do want to connect to you offline because I do think that there are some interviews here that I would like to incorporate into this
Hmm.
podcast in the future. So I can't wait for that. So
Absolutely.
good luck to you in the ultimate endurance run, which is raising four children. Uh, steady as she
Yes,
goes. Steady as she goes.
that's right. That's It's an ultra sport itself.
Yes, it is, with no buckle. Damn it. We should get one.
We should.
Thanks so much for your time again. I can't wait to do it in the
I
future.
appreciate you, Scotty. Thank you.
You too.